Right. There is a little bit of noise in the background though. Oh, there we go. All right. Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead, and Kelly is here. Yep, everybody, looks like everybody's accounted for. Good morning. Happy December for those of us in the trenches in the classroom. Wishing you days of strength. So I'm going to officially call our meeting to order at 9:32. And then everybody ready to get started? Cool. So let's go ahead and get started with public comment. So Kelly, we do have public comment today, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Boast has joined us today.
Okay. Welcome.
Good morning. Great to see so many familiar faces. Thank you for the work that you all are doing. I'm Cheryl Boast. I'm the president for the Maryland State Education Association, proudly representing over 75,000 educators across Maryland. And I'm also a 4th and 5th grade teacher. I'm coming before you today to give comment on COMAR 13A.070803A, which is talking about the incentive for national board, which really is creating a requirement for anybody with ELA, moving forward with ELA for national board, that they must pass a test or prove their knowledge in the science of reading. We value the science of reading. It has become part of our prerequisite of getting a certification. We see this regulation as setting up a barrier for many educators. So imagine you're on a race. I'm going to use Jake Zebley as our social studies teacher moving forward. Melita is our math person moving forward. And I'm the reading person moving forward, getting my national board certification to hopefully move up in the career ladder. Jake goes forward with national board. Melita goes forward with national board. I must stay at the starting line and finish an additional requirement before I can continue to move forward. And that will impact my ability to get into the career ladder. It'll impact my life earnings if I'm not unable to move forward and get my national board and get the additional salary enhancements. Again, we believe science of reading is important, but let's look at it as part of the prerequisite for educators instead of another hoop that people have to jump through to get to national board. I would also encourage you, as I've encouraged the state board, to lay out all of our certification requirements and see if there are barriers for special subject areas. Are there biases in testing or other barriers? We want to make it a balance between high standards but accessibility to our profession. And in order to do that, I think we need to look at the whole certification process. You all have done a great job advocating for educators in this process. So we're asking that this piece of regulation not move forward and instead look at how it can be part of the prerequisite for educators coming in. Leeds Grant has provided science of reading training in the requirement in many of our districts. So let's not make this an extra barrier. I'm open to any questions, and I just want to thank you all for the work that you do in this position and your many other hats that you wear, and hope that you have a restful and relaxing holiday.
Thank you. Were there, forgot. Kelly, can we ask questions when we do public comment? I don't remember, drawing a blank.
We typically don't, but it's your board, Ms. Kitchen. You can do what you wish.
Okay. Were there any questions, brief questions? So we're not going to say go into a full debate here, but were there questions? And if there are questions, yeah, let's do this. If you have questions, please send them to me to the chair, and then I can reach out to Ms. Bose with those questions. Let's do that. So if you have questions, please get them to me, and then I will get those questions to her. As usual, as PSTEB, we have robust discussions. And so if some of those questions can be answered as we start our discussion, we can go ahead and answer them. Thank you. All All right. Next up on our agenda, we have our state board update. And Kelly's going to give us our update.
Yes, yes. So to segue, since Ms. Bosch just shared that comment and it is related, I will let you know that one of the actions that the state board took on Tuesday was to withdraw their permission to publish the regulations that Ms. Bosch was just talking about. So those are the regulations that codify the processes related to the National Board Incentive Program, which is the program that pays for the candidacy for National Board for teachers that meet the eligibility requirements of the law. And just to give you a little bit of background about what Ms. Bose was talking about, in those regulations, the State Board of Education, who is the board that promulgates those regulations in consultation with the Professional Standards Board and the AIB, they felt strongly that we should add a requirement that individuals who are pursuing their national board candidacy in any area, and there are a handful of them that would require that particular type of teacher to provide reading instruction, that they would have to, in order to get funding for the candidacy, they would have to demonstrate that they are proficient in teaching reading using evidence-based reading instructional practices based on scientific research. And that specifically, we got a lot of comments about that echoed what Ms. Bosch shared. There was concern from several different constituencies regarding the legality of requiring that as part of the candidacy, the fiscal funding for candidacy. So those regulations were withdrawn. The state board heard those concerns, they withdrew those regulations, and we will be working on them some more and bringing them back to this board at some point for consultation. I don't imagine it will happen next month. We can't bring the regulations back to the state board for permission to publish until the moratorium is finished for that through through Annapolis, through AELR. And I believe that's March, but I could be wrong there. I'll have to check. But sometime prior to that, I anticipate we will have those regulations for this board to review, to provide feedback to the MSD, and we will take that feedback. Again, we did this a while ago. Some of you were not a part of the board. We will take that feedback back to the state board as they craft those regulations. So that's my first update. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that before I go on to the rest.
So Kelly, is it my understanding that that requirement was not part of the blueprint? Is that correct?
That's correct. It's not a statutory requirement. It was an additional layer of accountability that was placed into the regulations by the state board. And it was based on concern that the national board, being curriculum agnostic, does not look at whether or not a candidate is engaging in evidence-based practices when they submit their portfolio. And so that there is a chance that they could be submitting a portfolio that is scored well, because of the way that process looks, that where the instructional practices that are being used by that teacher are not grounded in science. And there's a very strong concern there. And the state board has made that concern widely known. During the meeting, Dr. Wright offered to have a personal conversation with the CEO of the national board to determine how they can change their standards and their materials that they publish to ensure that those practices that are not aligned to scientific research are eliminated, and they can take a stronger stance on ensuring that candidates are submitting portfolio work that is grounded in scientific research. So we'll see where that goes. The MSD has been talking to the national board for months about this concern. And I will certainly keep this board up to date with any new information.
Thank you. Kelly, were there any other important information that we need to hear from the state board, or is that it?
Well, yes, ma'am, because the regulations were adopted. So there you go. It's only been, what, 7 years?
Only 7 years, only 7 years. Only 7 years.
Regulations were adopted by the state board. And what that means is that it's go time, and they will become effective April 1st, 2024. And at this point, this is where, the MSDE really needs to kick it into high gear. And we've already been in communication with many of our constituents, and we will continue to do so as we plan to roll out the technical assistance and the training that will be required to implement these regulations. So that's the big news. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah. So for those of us who have been around for about 7 years, this is huge news. And for many people, this is their tenure, their baby from on the board. Like, I think you always remember coming into this board, if you stay on the board long enough, you always remember your first sets of regulations. And so for many people on the board, this was their first set. So really amazing. Were there any questions? Because I know once we kind of get through a big thing like that, it's always like, what happens next? Like, now that we've done this, and how do we move forward? And we are going to talk a little bit about that today. But for newer people on the board, any questions or anything about anything in pertaining to the regs we just passed? Ms. Bacon.
Thank you. Are they public knowledge? I mean, obviously, I know they've been available for public comment, but if people are asking sort of, hey, I'm up for recertification soon, are things changing? Like, I assume this is information that can be shared and discussed. There's no sort of like moratorium on it in terms of public knowledge, correct?
Correct. Absolutely. Now, what you're not going to find in the regulations, because it will come out in policy, and this, of course, is going to be like everyone's number one question, like, what about me? What happens to my professional certificate that I have right now that I need to renew? So we have drafted some guidance and policy, a memorandum that will go out. We'll blast it out, and we'll also put the information on our website here. Give us a few days, but just so this board understands and can deliver this message to whomever inquires, what we have decided is that for individuals that have a professional certificate, everyone will have one full validity period to either come to the table with the old renewal requirements that are in regulations pre-April, which is the 6 credits, what have you. I'm not going to get into the minutia. Or they can kind of change gears if they haven't done anything for renewal, and they can do the PDPs, which does give you more flexibility in the ways that you can earn them, but also gives you more stringent requirements as far as the focus of your professional development. So they can do either during that full validity period. Once you renew under these regulations after April 1st, then you're in the new regs. And that following 5-year renewal will have to meet the requirements of the new regs, but everyone will get a full validity period. So what that means, Joy, is I'm going to take you and me as an example. So if your certificate was just renewed this past July and you have 4.5 years, you can still decide, I'm going to do what's in the old regs because I've already done it. You're a go-getter. You've done your 6 credits. You can submit those in 4.5 years. And let's say I am getting renewed in January of, let's say I got renewed January 4 years ago. I have a year before my renewal. And again, I can do either. But when I get that new license and I'm and that's really what can be like the prompt, is when that piece of paper says license instead of certificate. That's my prompt that, okay, now I'm in the new regs and I have to meet those renewal requirements when I come back to the table in 5 years. So we will issue that guidance, and I certainly can share that guidance with you all. If you actually need a document that you can hand to someone, should they ask, should they come to you as a member, we will have it on our website. We will be widely disseminating that information.
Thank you. Dr. Gartland?
Morning. Yeah, I had a similar question about pretty copies. Is MSTE going to issue a prettier copy of the regs that we can share, or do we just share? I hope share the right version. What we've been working on.
So at this point, we should be sharing exactly what's published in the register. Now, I know that the font can be small. Like I don't have any problem kind of manipulating that document to make it a little bit more reader friendly, making it a larger font, maybe taking everything out of italics. If that's easier, we can certainly do that for you. But we will kind of stick with what is being published in the register. And then come April, all of COMAR online will be updated so that we can access the regulations the way we're used to doing so electronically.
I think that would be better to be reader friendly if you would work on it. Yeah, I see some head nods, so thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any questions about the difference between regs and policy before we move forward that we want to have clarified before we move forward? Or is everyone clear on that? It's okay if you're not. All right, moving forward.
Wait, go ahead and share the difference just for our edification, please. Whomever.
So Kelly, the difference between regulation and policy is regulations is what we just did. Mm-hmm. So looking at the very, I guess, formal language of everything. And then when we talked about policy, that'll come from MSDE, and then the local LEAs and higher eds will kind of break it down even more in terms of what it's going to look like for them.
So sure. So at a very high level in Maryland, and this is Maryland specific because in many states, policy is what states call what we call regulations. So it can be confusing. So in Maryland, we have statute, which good example are all of the blueprint. So our education article is really the body of statutory language that drives our work. So there's statute. And then from statute, we can promulgate regulation, which again is codifying something, making it, Sean, I don't know what the right word is, not law, but it has the teeth of law, right? And regulation cannot trump statute. So you go down, right? Statute, regulation, and then if there is further interpretation that's required by the department, then we tend to call that policy, technical assistance policy, policy memorandum. You'll hear all these terms used. And that's really to assist our constituents in interpreting something that's not crystal clear in the regulation. We try to write regulations so that we don't have to write policy, but sometimes it's necessary. So that's more of the, okay, in practice, this is the interpretation, this is what it could look like, here are some examples type of things. So this are kind of like the 3 layers in Maryland, if that helps.
And so is there any feedback loop from this board or from the state board once policies are created by MSDE?
I'm happy to share any policies that are developed with this board.
Maybe to Keisha's, maybe to Keisha's point.
Yeah,
we would give our constituents group might provide guidance or suggestions for consideration to MSDE while MSDE is developing policy, correct?
Absolutely. Anyone can always provide feedback to us. I mean, like our educator preparation community, our LEAs, we're in constant communication with our certification authorized partners. So certainly, usually policy is developed because questions come from one of those groups. And it's not, we can't simply point to a regulation, which is ideal, and say, let's go over the regulation, this is what it means. If there's a circumstance where pointing to the regulation doesn't answer the question, and that question is widespread, that's usually what prompts us to develop a policy memo.
Keisha, it would really be before then MSDE develops the policy. That's what you're saying, Kelly. That would be the time
Yeah,
to ask
usually
questions and provide
questions
input.
drive that. Yeah, yeah. Now, I will say that for the program approval regulations, and we're not really, I guess you could call it policy, but of course, there's going to be a massive amount of documentation that needs to be developed. Rubrics, templates, that kind of thing, which is different than the licensure regulations, which we're gonna try really hard to stay within the regulations and stay away from policy. There are working documents that need to be developed for the ed prep piece, which I think of as different. And certainly, we would like to hear from our constituencies about, what those documents could be, what things would be helpful. We actually just sent out a survey the day that the regulations were adopted, asking our educator preparation community to kind of weigh in on, what are the things that are going to be most helpful for you? What challenges or barriers do you foresee in making this transition? That kind of information. So that's the kind of thing that, we just do as a matter of practice.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bolson? Oh, you're on mute.
I just want to restate to make sure I'm not missing something, because and this might be clarification so locally, our school boards have policy, and that's really more our guiding. So we use the word policy very differently at the LEA level. And for us, when there's an interpretation of policy that's the administration puts in, we're calling those procedures. Other districts may call them regs. I'm not sure. So these words get mixed up depending on the level you're on. So just so I can be clear, in my mind, statute is voted on by the legislature. So they give us statute. Regs are voted on at the sort of the next governance level, which is in this case, the State Board of Education. Is that it? So the state board has to.
Yes, and for these regulations specifically, it's both the State Board and the Professional Standards Board.
Okay, so the two have to agree in this case. Okay,
yes.
But those are delivered out of statute. Okay, and then so when you're talking about policies, those are really the procedure, and those are decided on at the administration level. So MSDE can design the policies; they don't need to be voted on by the state board.
Correct.
So that's the opposite at the school level, where policies are what the board votes on, and those are the binding. And then the procedures the administration creates, in the school system, at least in Harford County, we use the term procedures. So toggling back and forth between the state level work and the local work, I'm going to need a little cheat sheet, I think. So you're going to need to keep working. So that was a helpful explanation. I just wanted to be clear on who decides. And it sounds like legislature, state board, and PSTEB, and then MSDE. And then again, with policies, so MSDE won't be the only ones doing policy. Who else? Or is it only MSDE that would be creating policy connected to these regs that were just passed?
I would imagine that every single LEA will have procedures. Now, I can't talk about policy. Dr.
Well, I'm talking about the policy you were just describing, which is more the guidance from MSD.
Correct. So I would imagine that each LEA would have their, then would take that guidance or the regulations directly, and they would issue their own policies and procedures that make sense for their LEA.
As in board policies, which would be binding board policies. Okay, sorry, this was more just a governance lesson. I just wanted to make sure I got the language.
It's very helpful, though. I think it's very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Allen?
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question then. So like a specific example. So everyone knows that I had my reservations or have my reservations about the in-district pathway. And so figuring out what that looks like then is going to be fleshed out through policy. So like things like who develops the pathway coursework. So can for-profit organizations develop them? Can districts develop them? is the pathway going to be reviewed regularly? How the Maryland state approved programs are? So questions like that, is that something that the board will discuss, or is that just figured out by MSDE?
So I think we definitely will discuss it. I know the state board definitely wants to be involved in this process. I imagine that this board would like to be involved in this process. Specific to one of your questions, I can tell you that the State Board of Education has already been vocal in a public forum, and they are interpreting this regulation to mean that only institutions of higher education can provide that coursework piece, that it cannot be done completely in-house or with a for-profit. So I imagine that is a really good example of where MSDE will have to release a policy memorandum so that all of our LEAs understand that as they're developing, and there's going to be a lot of guidance with regard to this particular pathway as we flesh it out. But one of those pieces, we can already see that it's going to be, okay, when you're developing this pathway, these are the parameters as far as the coursework is concerned. It does have to be a partner that is an institution of higher education.
Thank you.
Dr. McGee?
Good morning, Kelly. I just want a quick question, follow-up question for you. Who received the survey that was just released? Did it go to deans and directors, or?
It did. It went to our listserv of deans and directors, and I'm going to turn to Alex to give more specific information.
I was going to say, yeah, I would love to know if there's like a timeline on that, because some folks miss timelines, and I want to make sure we don't miss a timeline.
So Dr. McGee, in terms of timeline and deans and directors, what are you referencing?
Like, when does this survey have to be completed?
Survey for what?
That they just released. I guess it was feedback that Kelly was saying that everything has been approved, and it went to the deans and directors. The survey was released, she said, as soon as the regs were approved. So I'm curious, how long do the folks have to share that with faculty and get feedback to then make sure we meet the deadline on the survey?
Okay.
So
Alex.
yeah, Chris, I can give you an answer on that. So we sent it out Tuesday, and we realized there was a little bit of a glitch with the link to the survey, and I didn't click something I showed. So I resent it this morning, probably about a half an hour before. I sent it to everyone in my contacts for deans and directors, alternative programs, and community colleges. I sent it to everybody and all of our sort of like associated partners, just to get the word out. And there is no timeline on the survey because we're going to be planning through, we're going to continue planning through the month of December. Our first like meeting that we're going to have with deans and directors is going to happen in January. And I think that'll be probably the final time where we really, hear from everybody about what their needs are, because we've already been planning. But I didn't want to put a deadline on it because I know that we're in like winter months where schools are off, and I wanted to make sure that people continue to give feedback. We can always move and shift and change as we're going. We're going to be doing technical assistance all next year, but we're going to really front load it from January through April. So I expect we're going to continue to get feedback.
Okay, great.
Thanks for getting the word out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dr. Shockley?
Good morning. Thank you so much. Alex, I hope that I'm in your contacts, but I did not receive the email. And the University of Maryland did not receive the email to my knowledge. And if you could send that, I would really appreciate it. I will double check.
I will happily resend it to you, but I sent it to so many people in the systems.
Okay.
I can't imagine somebody didn't get it, but I'm going to resend it to you right now. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Alex, on that same note, is it possible for us as a board to receive that?
Sure.
I mean, I would love to have access to that to make sure, we get to ask folks. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, and so moving forward on our announcements and communication update. So let's first start with announcements. Are there any announcements? We know that the regs were adopted, but are there any other announcements from board members? Ms. Meadows.
So I would like to share that Ms. Wilson has resigned from the board. She has taken a new job with Johns Hopkins University, and is busy, understandably very busy in her new role. And unfortunately, she can't give the time anymore that she knows is needed to do this work. And so I know she's not here, but I wanted to recognize her and her service. She's been on the board for several years. She's been an integral part of the work that we just had adopted, and now we're starting the real work. And so I just wanted to make sure that we recognize Ms. Wilson's service.
Mm-hmm. Yes, she was definitely a voice on the board. And so we understand her commitments, but we thank her for her time on the board. Dr. Shockley?
Good morning again. Thank you so much. This is sort of a retroactive announcement. I hope you don't mind, but the University of Maryland College Park on World Teachers Day did offer a pinning ceremony to our educators to usher them into the profession. We will continue to do that in 2024. And hopefully at that time, I'll be able to invite individuals who would like to join us from this board. So I just wanted to announce that, even though it's retroactive, I think that it's a great opportunity for all of us as educators to have something to usher us in to the profession, and then to remind us about the profession that we hold so dear. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Allen?
One more message from University of Maryland on February 1st. And you all will be getting an invitation. On February 1st, we'll be holding a teacher education summit where we'll be meeting with various stakeholders and holding conversations around recruitment, mainly recruitment and attracting more folks into the profession, and focusing on some of the innovations that have been developed throughout the state. So add that to your calendar, and hopefully you'll get that invitation soon, February 1st.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Meadows?
Thank you. So I just want to be clear, because I know there's been some confusion about my role has changed a couple times over the past 6 months. And I don't expect y'all to keep up with my life, but I did want you to know that I have stepped back into my role as Assistant State Superintendent for the MSDE. I am back full time, and in that role, I will continue, unless otherwise instructed, I will continue to sit on this board as the superintendent's designee. So I just wanted to make that clear.
We are happy to have you back. We were concerned. I was feeling like we were the group of kids with the substitute. I didn't know if we were going to have a new person or what was going on. So we are happy to have you back. It's been a pleasure working with you, Kelly, over the years. And so, when speaking on behalf of the board, welcome back, or maybe clarification on welcome back, but we're just happy to have you. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Any more announcements?
Yes, I have one.
Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to invite everyone to the Booker T. Washington Middle School Winterfest concert. It'll be taking place on December 21st from sorry about that. The school bell was ringing. It will be taking place from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. It's free of charge. We may have like concession or something for fundraising, but all are welcome. Family as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Melita, can I just say one thing real quick?
Yes, I'm like, it's like bouncing around. I have to find your square. Go ahead. I'm like,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So I know it was mentioned last meeting. I don't know that it was officially, whether he was officially introduced, but Keith Krempel has joined our team for program approval. He's on the screen. Keith, your name, you left the H off your name in there, but he is Keith, not Keat. So he's joined our team. So he's our first coordinator of program approval, educator preparation, to rejoin to restock our office, I'll say. And at this last board meeting, we were fortunate enough to also hire another coordinator and a manager who are going to start in the middle of next week and second week in January, respectively. So when we have our next meeting, thanks, Chris. When we have our next meeting, we'll have them introduced, I hope, to you all formally. And I appreciate your patience with my office during the time that we didn't have anybody.
Thank you for that, because I know, I don't know if it was last month or a couple months, at one point during these meetings, we talked about the capacity of the office to be able to provide the technical assistant that some of the higher institutions, possibly there was a concern there in that area. So it is good to hear that the staffing is on its way, and that there is an increased capacity for your office. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other announcements? All right, I'm going to go. All right, so with the communication report, we've been quite busy from the last meeting. And so I do want to start with the subcommittee and the subcommittee with the communication team. And so I do want to give the opportunity to the members to kind of speak on it. But I do want to take the opportunity to say the subcommittee, the communication subcommittee was amazing. My apologies for just sending the letter out this morning. I thought I had sent it to Kelly to send it out and didn't realize it until right before the meeting. So you do have a copy of the letter that was sent out to you. And so what was included in that was the cover letter that was sent to the state board with our letter. So I included the cover letter because our letter was addressed to the legislator, not necessarily to the state board. So included a cover letter just to explain where we were coming from and kind of our stance and our position and what was the purpose of the letter, because the purpose of the letter wasn't necessarily, and that's why it wasn't addressed to them, but I felt like the state board needed a little bit of background information of where we were going with this letter. And so I want to personally thank the communications subcommittee for that. Jake, you were amazing. Jake, you were amazing pulling it all together. And then I'll just take a moment to let anyone from the subcommittee, anything that they want to add in or any other thoughts about the letter and surrounding the letter. Nothing from the subcommittee?
Thank you again to
Okay.
Josh for taking on the role of composing the letter. Thank you very much.
So I'll give everybody a moment to read over the actual letter. And so we can, not going to necessarily discuss it, but I do want to kind of discuss what has happened since the letter was sent and what's kind of going on with everything right now. So I'll give everybody a moment or two to read through the letter, and then I can update you because it's probably important to know what was in the letter. Does anyone need more time? The letter? Or is we ready to move forward? Okay, so the letter was sent over to the state board. I did send it to the state board president, Mr. Crawford. And so there was some feedback from him given on the letter. The letter was shared with the state board. And so there was some feedback given. And so I do want to share that with you. And so as many of you know, there is a great working relationship with PSTEB and the state board at this time. And so we were given some feedback on it. And so the decision of the state board right now is that they are not necessarily against it, but they're not necessarily in a place to support it either. They would like the opportunity to do their own research with some of the things that we presented in the letter. So they would like the opportunity to do their own research on the letter and look at some of the things that we pointed out in the letter in terms of some of our concerns. It was acknowledged our expertise and what our board represents in terms of our members on this board, in terms of having classroom teachers, in terms of having superintendents, in terms of having members from higher ed. So that part was welcome and understood. You know, with that, they do not agree or do not think that we would have the support of the AIB with this, and that it may take some time. It was shared that we would like to move forward, if I'm taking the direction of the board from our last meeting, that we did want to get this out in front of the legislators with this. And so the conversation that was had is that us PSTEB bringing awareness of how the portfolio-based assessments are a barrier in our profession, and looking at rising educators coming into our profession. So it was understood with that. There was a, let's say, what's the right word I'm looking for? Understanding that PSTEB is going to move forward with this. And so that's where we were kind of left with it, that they do like that we are bringing awareness out this and looking at our expertise with this and how we're seeing it and how our perspective, even though we both have a role in regulation, but our perspective is a little bit different in our level of expertise that we're bringing. And so there was a mutual respect of what we want to do, and that at this time, they would like the opportunity to do their own research and kind of look at some things, but the lines of communication are still open. It is still a very collaborative relationship. Mr. Crawford and I will continue to talk and have conversations so that there is an understanding on both levels in terms of the state board, as well as the concerns or priorities for PSTEB. And so some of the members of the state board were in agreement of where we were, but they would like that opportunity to do their own research. So that was the feedback from it. So it did go to the state board. I guess I want to point out that PSTEB is an independent board, and that changed a lot with the blueprint. So we do have the opportunity to move things and do things that we would like to do in terms of our priorities. So that is what has happened with the letter. So I wanted to give you the letter, let you know that I did attach a cover letter to it to give it a little bit of context. There was a conversation that was had between myself and Mr. Crawford, who is the president of the state board. And so there isn't any animosity there at all. It was a great conversation where I think we had the opportunity to understand each other's priorities and where PSTEB stood on this and why this was an issue for us, understanding the role of the AIB and what their thoughts could be. We were only speculating. We did not have the opportunity, was not had to talk to the AIB, but possibly where they would stand on it. And so it was a great conversation. We're going to continue to have the conversations, but I wanted to bring that back to you and kind of talk about what are our next steps and picking up from the November meeting. And now we are in December. Miss Yoho.
Thank you. I think the letter is very well written. And my thought was kind of where you were just going, in that obviously as individuals, we could approach the AIB, Executive Director Rachel Heiss, or Chair Ike Leggett. But I wondered if as a board, could we have discussion? Is it, kosher protocol, whatever, for us to also have a conversation directly with the AIB?
So with that being said, in terms of, are you referring to having a conversation with the AIB in the same manner that I had a conversation with the state board president?
Yes.
That relationship with the AIB is still in the works, it's in the process. I can't say that as chair, there is the same level of communication with the AIB. Not that I'm not open to that kind of communication, but I think it is something that we are trying to get to a place to have those conversations. And again, we have to remember the position of the AIB. And so, what's in the blueprint, and it is something that is in the blueprint. And so just understanding everyone's perspective, no different than we as board members, and we have our stakeholder groups and our constituents, and just kind of looking at the role of the AIB. I am open to having that conversation, but the relationship is not there in the same manner as it is with the state board right now. Mr. Bolson?
So I can say pretty confidently that the superintendents would be behind PSTEB in this particular sentiment. Mm-hmm. And I have some unique experience with EdTPA. I've actually been to the EdTPA conference when I worked at in the UNC system. And I think this is one of those things, I don't know if there's anyone who's proposing, there'll need to be a legislative change, because my experience in working with the AIB folks is particularly Chair Leggett and Ms. Heiss. I don't know necessarily where Dr. Kerwin would stand, but they're really of the mind that this is the law. We're sticking with this, and we're not open to a lot of changes. That they're looking at minor tweaks this year, but I also know there's going to be a lot of legislation coming with a variety of proposals to the blueprint, and I don't know what that's going to mean. I guess my question is, are we aware of anyone entertaining legislation in this session to adjust this particular element of the blueprint? And maybe I would ask more generally, because of my kind of newness to this board, is how much this appears to be the only thing I've seen so far that PSTEB has said, this is, there's a lot of good in the blueprint, but this is something that we don't agree with. Mm-hmm. Are there other things like that? And I know we're going to maybe talk about some more things today, but, should PSTEB be talking with legislators about changes rather than going straight to the AIB, whose job really it is to hold the line? So I understand why they would be resistant.
So two parts. So let me answer that first part. So with that first part, that is, I think as chair, I think that's what our next step should be. I do know that with MSDE, there is a legislative liaison. I think that's the right word. And so looking at what are the channels with that, I spoke very briefly with Kelly about that, with that person, and getting the context and figuring out what is our next steps with that. I know for many of us in our constituent groups, they have a government relations or, lobbyists and things like that. And so we have that, but I am not 100% sure in terms of the process. We are in the position that we do want to talk to legislators and have those conversations about here are our feelings about this, and this is why, and we've done the research and things like that. So Kelly, in terms of that, I know you gave me the name, but what would our next steps be as a board to kind of look into this session, or definitely the spring session, with our concerns?
I think at this point, you probably are talking about next session, because things tend to happen pretty early, and the session's about to start. I I think that if this board wants to get the ear of the legislature, then this board is going to have to be in Annapolis. They're going to have have some conversations, identify some politicians that are willing to listen. There's a whole process for that, and I'm not an expert in that process.
The person, and please forgive me because I don't remember the person's name and I don't have the email in front of me. Is this where, as chair, I would reach out to her?
You can certainly reach out to her for some advice. I know that you have spoken with Mr. Hands, the executive director of the state board. He is probably a very good contact because he is well versed in politics and how it works in Annapolis. He used to be a legislative liaison, and he's working closely with the state board. And I think that it would be prudent for this board to collaboratively approach the legislature with the state board if possible. So I think that working with Mr. Hands and continuing to have conversations with President Crawford is the best way to go.
Okay. And then Mr. Balson, and then Dr. Zebley, I'll get to you just in a second. In terms of your other question about has PSTEB done something like this before? I feel like with our previous chair, there was some conversations. I cannot remember what was the issue, but there were some conversations about with legislators about some of our concerns and our priorities with this. But in terms of us going to Annapolis and boots on the ground situation, Darren might be the better person to answer that question, but I know many of us on this board are no strangers to Annapolis and knocking on doors and talking to legislators. So hopefully I answered your questions.
I think since there appears to be pretty universal agreement on the board about this position. And so the idea of PSAM weighing in, because we work with legislators all the time, and also looping in MABE. We're also often in touch with them, and they're present at everything education during session, and so at a minimum, there's two groups there that can help advance this. So I mean that's just what I can see doing, but I want to make sure that I'm not stepping out of line either. So maybe there's another conversation that so. Melina, maybe I'm bringing you to a conversation with Mary Pat Fannin, who helps us draft, our position from PSAM.
Right.
And I know Cheryl Bose is still listening in. I know where MSEA stands on this, but that's, obviously another source.
Yes. And we will continue, as PSTEB always does, to have the robust conversations that we're known for, and we will figure this out. I wouldn't say that this is uncharted territory, but it's changed now because we have equal footing, and we didn't always have that. And so now that we are, really operating as an independent board, it's probably time for us to really understand these channels and start working through those. Dr. Zebley, thank you for your patience.
Oh, that's no problem at all. Thank you. I don't have a question. I just wanted to extend my appreciation to the chair. It's not just a letter. It's those relationships that you have built on behalf of our board to continue the conversation to affect the changes and the desire of the board. So I just wanted to say thank you. It's not just a hit send on a letter. You facilitated those conversations and getting all of the right leaders on board and having them.
Thank you, Dr. Zebley. Darren?
Yeah, I had a question, and this is probably more for Kelly. I know previously in the board, when we get legislative updates, oftentimes the State Board of Education or MSDE will either support a piece of legislation or they'll openly oppose it. When that happens, who is their staffing to help them get that message to the legislature? Because I'm assuming there has to be someone that's assigned to the board that does that. And the reason I'm asking is the responsibility to staff this board, I believe, is with your office. So do we use the same mechanism that they use, and are those people who assist them Are they the same people who would assist our board?
So in the past, Darren, so it's a little bit different for a state agency. So a state agency, just like a local education agency, we're constantly filling out fiscal notes throughout the legislative session, and a part of those fiscal notes is an explanation, and we usually take that opportunity when we get the request for a fiscal note to provide testimony, written testimony, whether we're supporting something or opposing it. So that's kind of that mechanism. And there's a process for that. There's an office for that that is spearheaded by an office at the division or the department. Historically, and I can't talk about what the state board does because I don't know. We'd have to ask Mr. Hands. Historically, this board, when it has taken a position on a bill, there is a mechanism for anyone to submit a letter of explanation, written testimony. There is a mechanism for that through the Maryland General Assembly website. And there's a window of time that's published in order to do that. So you have to submit, it's my understanding you have to submit that information within that window to be considered. And there's a process for that. That's the way it's been done, to my knowledge, with this board. I can certainly check with our legislative office to see if that still is the same process, if anything's changed in Annapolis. But at least as of last year, that was the process.
Okay, I appreciate that. And if you could check and maybe forward that information to Melita and myself so we can help go forward, that would be great. Because I think really we're kind of in a position now where we've got some time to do some education and reach out to folks that really are sort of new to this issue. So I really do. I kind of welcome this opportunity, and I welcome the fact that the state board wants to look into it. That makes perfect sense to me. All right, so thanks, Kelly. I appreciate it.
Dr. Shockley?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add some more information about some of the positions for and against EdTPA in the higher ed community and some other agencies. Individuals who oppose EdTPA are typically opposing the fact that there's a cut score at some institutions and in some states for its use. The benefits of EdTPA for those who agree with it is that it offers a portfolio opportunity, and it is an argument for doing away with some of the standardized assessments, including the standard reading test that the state of Maryland will eventually require for all educators, as well as tests like the Praxis, where there are multiple tests that are standardized. And so I just wanted to add that information so that we know as a board that if this does go away, that we will not necessarily have a portfolio assessment to sink our teeth into. We will only have something like the Praxis, which, based on what we've seen and read, does more damage in the way of financial, in terms of money and in terms of serving as a barrier into the profession. And I just want us to have that information as we move forward with the various constituents and entities.
Yes, Dr. Shockley, if you could get that to me as chair, and then I can get that information out to the board.
Certainly.
All right, I feel like I missed a hand. Did I get everybody? All right, I think that's everybody. So thank you for that. One more thing for my communication update. I did have the opportunity to talk to a young journalist about the blueprint in early childhood and what it looks like in terms of implementation, like real boots on the ground and concerns as an educator. So that was great to talk to a young person from University of Maryland, College Park. So that was great to just talk to them about it and barriers and what does it look like, you know, in real time and how does it impact? And so there were some questions about early childhood and PSTEB and state board. So I did want to share that information with the board in terms of communication updates, some things that the chair has been working on, and just was a great conversation with a young person and just talking about you know, how it would impact her if she was still like, you know, a student in high school versus teachers and things like that. So it was a great conversation about just a blueprint of what's going on. Dr. Gartland?
That was great, Melita. Thanks. I missed the beginning. Did you say, is it a newspaper or?
Yeah, it was a young journalist, communications major from University College Park. They were doing an article.
Oh, well, if they get back to, I'd be interested in reading about how they interpreted the conversation.
Sure. Dr. Shockley, is this a new hand or an old hand?
It's a new hand. I was just going to share about the article because I knew about it and I knew that they were going to reach out to you, and I knew the article was coming out, so I didn't know if you knew.
Yeah.
But speaking of students, I also am going to have to leave soon because my student will be defending her dissertation today. So I'll have to log off. But I just wanted the board to know that that will be an article, and I'm looking forward to Miss Kitchens being featured.
Yes, thank you. All right, so I think we had a lot with the state board update and communication update. And so now let's get back to our regularly scheduled program and look at the November minutes. They were sent out. So hopefully you had a chance to preview them. I'll give you another minute or so in case there were any edits that we needed to make. So I'm gonna give everybody a moment just to review those November minutes, and then we'll move forward with a motion.
I move to approve the November meeting minutes of PSTEB.
I second that. This is Dr. Taylor.
Motion to approve the November meeting minutes as written, seconded by Dr. Taylor. I feel like we should probably do the without objection. So if there are no objections, we will, sorry, Dr. Gartland, just so that because we are virtual, probably without objection, the November meeting minutes will be approved as written. All right, no objections. All right, regulatory update. Kelly, did we already have our update?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so we already kind of had our update. We got so excited that we skipped down the agenda. All right, so moving forward, are looking at the outlook, like what's next and what's coming, what to expect next. So our promulgation update or outlook, I should say, Kelly.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And hopefully you can see a PowerPoint. Someone could nod for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So just so y'all know, I've kind of lost your faces. I can only see a few people. So interrupt me, please, if you have questions. So looking forward to the immediate future with regard to our promulgation priorities, because as we've discussed, there are already next steps. There are already other things we have to tackle. And one of the things that I did want to mention that was discussed at the state board, which certainly the department is very much in favor of, is, the State Board of Education made it clear that we can't have another period of, 20 years before we look at licensure regulations and try to do this as this huge, massive lift, right? This needs to be a continuous conversation. And although, of course, throughout these years, we have been kind of tackling small pieces of the chapters, I think really moving forward, and it's really going to fall on this board to take the lead on this, I think, is to just continuously look at those pathways to certification, continuously look at potential barriers that we have in regulation that don't need to be in regulation, looking at the data, looking at our recruitment efforts and the diversity of our workforce to make whatever changes we need to. in the regulations, and we can't let them become stagnant. So I did want to share that message that was made loud and clear at the State Board of Education. And with that said, looking at the very next steps of promulgation, I have outlined a few things that we do need to jump into and look at as a board. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is we are going to have to align the regulations with the statutory amendments that were made during the 2023 session. And should any amendments come out of the 2024 session, we will have to align to those as well. So I've listed some that I just want to point out. I know we've talked about them in previous meetings, but I want to kind of hone in and make sure that the board understands exactly what we're talking about here. So most of these, I think there's one exception, are from the Educator Shortage Reduction Act that was passed in 2023. It amended several pieces of statute, the first being Maryland Code Education Article 6-120. 120 is one of the laws that really gets into the crux of the requirements for educator preparation. So specifically, we will need to update our definitions for partner school and for alternative teacher preparation program. As a reminder to this board, the definition of partner school now includes an eligible pre-kindergarten provider, which is defined in law, and opens up the opportunity for programs to place candidates in partner schools for a practicum that include those eligible pre-kindergarten providers, which opens the door to placing those early childhood candidates in our private placement, our private pre-K placements, as long as they are eligible. And at this point in time, the MSDE is determining what eligible means, and we're working directly with our educator preparation partners who are in this circumstance or who would like to place an individual in what could potentially be an eligible pre-kindergarten provider. So we do need to update that definition to align it to the law. Similarly, we have to update our definition for alternative teacher preparation program, because at this point with the Educator Shortage Reduction Act, it opens the door for an institution of higher education or a nonprofit organization to form an alternative preparation program without the partner of the county board. So previously, up until this point, the county board really had to drive that program. They were the ones with the need. They saw the need, and so they were the driver. They were the entity that had to approve that work. The new definition opens it up to where the county board is not necessarily required as a partner. And really, again, this goes to early childhood. So knowing that we have these goals and we're using a mixed delivery system in the state, and we have to have our private pre-K partners on board, this is an opportunity for example, Montgomery College, who has established an alternative program in partnership with Montgomery County Public Schools. Should they choose, someone like that could establish a program that does not include a county board, because really the purpose of that Montgomery College program is to place individuals, to recruit individuals from those private pre-K programs. And so the partnership with Montgomery County Public Schools was a necessity because of the law and the way the definition read, and that necessity is no longer. So it's just an example that I can give you of where, it may make sense to not have a county board. So we will have to update that definition. Questions about that before I move on? Okay. Sticking with 6-120, and really all of these updates in these couple of slides go to early childhood education preparation. The practicum requirements for early childhood education specifically have been expanded. So the previous law, of course, said you have to complete the training practicum, and this board is well aware that there are several criteria that that practicum has to meet for all teacher candidates, including early childhood education candidates. But what it does is it adds another way for those individuals to complete that practicum. It requires the MSDE in collaboration with our institutions of higher education to establish standards and criteria to evaluate the knowledge and skills from prior learning related to early childhood education. And what that means is establishing a standardized way to offer credit, to offer practicum experience based on that prior learning experience that candidate brings to the table. So for example, if you've got an individual who has worked in the private pre-K setting for the last 20 years, maybe they own their own business, they are working toward becoming certified in early childhood education, which is going to be a requirement come 2026 or 7. I apologize, I can't remember off the top of my head. Should that person have to do exactly the same thing as the candidate who has zero experience? No, their 20 years should be considered, and there should be a standard way of acknowledging that experience and awarding credit or experience from the practicum for the 20 years of experience. So that is currently being worked on by the department. And because this law has changed that for early childhood education candidates, we will need to add this component into the regulations as well. Next, we turn to Education Article 6-121, still talking about ed prep here. And this, the first bullet is new to the law. It says the department, in consultation with the Maryland Higher Education Commission, will establish specific goals for the recruitment and retention of teachers and teacher preparation programs throughout the state, and work with those programs that are not able to meet those goals established to develop an action plan that demonstrates how that program will meet the goals in the future. So that is a new component in the law, and given that it does have to do with ed prep, this board may want to consider codifying it in regulation if further interpretation is required. So I've included it here. And MSDE will work with MHEC and our EPPs on this. The second portion that's updated for 6-121 is virtual instruction. And this actually was from a different bill, not part of the Educator Shortage Reduction Act. And it specifically adds that long list that you've seen of all of the components that have to be included in the educator preparation program. There is a new bullet. It says training in the skills and techniques for teaching effectively in a virtual learning environment, including the use of online curriculum. So we definitely will have to add this language into our regulations. Questions about those? Okay, so alignment with statutory amendments is one of our priorities. Again, we already know what we have to realign with from 2023. 2024 will remain to be seen, but we will need to stay on top of it and make those amendments as well. And of course, what I didn't put here, but will have to be continuously reviewed, is that incorporation by reference in the educator preparation regulations. We will always need to look to see, what standards have been updated, and we will have to amend that incorporation by reference regulation on a regular basis. Dr. Allen.
Yeah, I just wanted to, bring our awareness to how the affirmative action decision may affect recruitment and retention in higher ed in general, but then how it's going to impact our teacher education programs. So as we are working towards, discussing this in greater depth, that's something that we should be considering.
Absolutely. That is a very good point. Ms. Kitchen, if there are any other hands up, I can't tell. No.
Sorry, I was on mute. I don't see any other hands.
Okay. Okay, then I am going to shift away to our second promulgation priority, which we talked about at length during our November meeting. which is the standardization of literacy terminology. We've got some good feedback from the Reading League of Maryland as part of our public comments for both sets of regulations here I'm talking about. And really ensuring that the language that's in the regulation is standardized across regulations so that there's no question about what we mean when we say, for example, that instructional practices must be supported by scientific evidence. So the point was made in the comments that, you know, there are different phrases used from one regulation to another throughout the chapters, and we should standardize that. And we agreed when we talked about it in October, November, that was good advice. And so we will need to look at both sets of regulations to ensure that the phrasing is consistent and it is clear. So that is a piece of this. The Reading League also asked us to consider leadership preparation when we're talking about literacy, to include supporting teacher implementation of evidence-aligned practices. And as we move toward looking at that administrator 1-2 licensure area, which you're going to see in just a second as a priority, I think we should keep that in the back of our minds, thinking about how, you know, if it is appropriate to have some type of language for that preparation to support evidence-aligned practices for scientific research-based reading instruction. And then, of course, continuously looking at those literacy competencies to make sure that they are as clear as they can possibly be, that they are as organized as they can possibly be. If we have missed something, it's just something that this board will have to continuously look at. Again, we're not going to let this go stagnant. We've got a lot of work going on in this state with regard to literacy. Dr. Wright shared during the state board meeting that she has just hired an individual that is very well respected in Mississippi, that did a lot of work there to move that state forward with the progress they made in literacy. And we're very excited that that individual will be joining the department in January. So again, we're not going to lose any steam here. And this board, of course, will have to continuously look at how it affects licensure, how it affects preparation, and adjust as necessary. So that is our second priority, is that literacy piece. Questions about that?
Remember off the top of your head who that person is?
I don't. I knew someone was going to ask me. I apologize. I do not remember her name.
Sorry for being the one who asked.
That's okay. I should know her name, but I don't.
So that's why I said off the top of your head. So that's okay. We'll find out sometime.
We will. Oh, I think Dr. McGee has her hand up.
Yes, so I'm wondering, when this person does join, is it possible for us to revisit bringing them in? Because we've had that on our agenda and bumped it and bumped it and bumped it to the point where it just bumped it all the way off.
Yep.
So
I've already made a note as soon as I heard the announcement.
Thanks, Kelly.
Sure. Okay. All right, let's turn to our third priority, which is, again, the administrator licensure requirements. So it is our goal to get an invitation out after the holidays. I've listed the groups that I know we need to invite to the table, but I wanted to open this up to this board if there is another group that we should be including here, or if anyone on this board would like to participate in this work group. I think it would be a great idea for this board to identify someone to sit at the table as part of this work group. And I certainly can extend the same invitation to the State Board of Education if they would like to have someone. But these are, off the top of my head, the constituents that I know need to be at the table.
Ms. Yoho?
Thank you. I'd like to recommend Maryland Association of Boards of Education have an invitation extended if you feel it appropriate.
Miss Farmer? She here? Is she here? Miss Farmer? Uh-oh. I'm scrolling through. Is Miss Farmer still with us? May stepped away. Is there any interest from members of the board to be a part of this work group?
And you can certainly let me know. You don't, I don't mean to put anyone on the spot.
Am I talking? Can you hear me? Can everybody? Okay. No one said anything. I was like, is my mic on? Okay. Any other groups? Should we add MSEA?
Yeah, I think we should add MSEA.
Yeah. Okay.
I think Dr. Zebley has his hand up, Lita.
Yeah, I didn't get the alert for Dr. Zebley. Dr. Zebley? I didn't get the alert for him.
Hi, good morning again. I noted that MSEA was not on the list. MSEA does represent administrators as well, but also I think it's important to have a classroom teacher's perspective, not as a majority opinion. And just to put myself out there as an option, I do adjunct with educational leaders in my part-time work. So I would be more than willing to serve as that teacher voice if the committee so desires.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Bobbitt?
I agree with Jacob. I was also raising my hand to express interest. I'm currently pursuing this license and wanted to know if I could possibly participate in any way. And I wanted to know more about this work group.
Okay. Kelly, did you get those? I feel like it's like I start missing people. I have to like scroll. Okay. Kelly, did you? Well, Miss Bobbitt, I think that Kelly probably would reach out to you with more information unless it was like a generic question, but she probably will reach out to you with more information regarding the work group and meetings and all of that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, and our next priority, which is very near and dear to both mine and Sean's heart, is disciplinary action. I know we made a lot of changes to the disciplinary action processes and that chapter of the regulations, but we're continuously looking to see how we can offer more transparency and clarification with regard to these processes, because these are so important. I mean, it is so important to be transparent. We have already identified some clarification that needs to happen with regard to the denial of that certificate based on disciplinary action. So we'll want to update that and bring it to you. And then there is a mechanism for all licensing bodies in the state. It's through state government, Article 10-226, to take action to suspend a license due to public safety. And we do find that sometimes we have to use this statute because it's something that does not fall under one of our causes. And we don't currently have a process in place that's codified to ensure that it's clear what needs to happen and that it's in alignment with what happens if we take one of our causes and not use this statute. So Sean and I will work on developing some language to add that as well. So there's just two things that are at the top of our minds with regard to disciplinary action processes. So that I've added as a priority.
And can I just chime in with one or two other little things, Kelly? So one of the things that we've that I think Kelly and I are also going to kind of discuss the merits of, in light of the new language in the regulations. We have terms in the regs that I think we rely. One example, misconduct is one of the, obviously one of the big causes we see over and over is dismissal or resignation after an allegation of misconduct involving a student in any school system or any minor. And one of the things that we've been we've kind of, I think MSDE has adopted the legal definition of misconduct from Black's Law Dictionary, which has been operative for us for a while, in my tenure here, which, it just generally says, and the definition of employee misconduct, it is very broad and just says it can range from anything from minor infractions to criminal offenses. And the definition of misconduct is, like I said, has been operative for us, but I think it would be helpful if we can maybe codify it in our own regulation, and define the term in our definitions section. And the same thing, another thought arises in terms of substantiation. One of the things we've done is, as far as the dismissal, the cause for dismissal after an allegation of misconduct is the, some substantiation of misconduct is now required. And while we want to make sure that it's not just a baseless blind allegation that's not credible, dismissed and forces MSD to act, at the same time, we want to make sure that we're not making it an insurmountable task to be able to take action against these educators who do have serious misconduct issues. So I think Kelly and I are going to be discussing those definitions and maybe bringing some ideas to the board as far as how best to define those terms for the board's consideration. Thanks, Kelly, for letting me chime in.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions from board members about disciplinary action processes? Okay. All right, then at this point, those are the priorities that, I've kind of been noting as we've been going along for the very next steps. But I did want to open it up to the board to let me know if there's something that I've missed, or if there's another priority you think we should be addressing ASAP.
Were there any, just in case I don't want to miss anyone's hand, was there any other questions or concerns or anything that we need to add for our priorities? Okay. All right. So we have so going into 2024, we have our priorities going into 2024. So Kelly, in terms of where do we start? Like, we've kind of finished. And so now where do we start next month?
So based on the priorities that I just reviewed, I can certainly provide an update with regard to the work group that we're establishing for the administrator license.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason why Sean and I can't have language for you to start looking at for the disciplinary action. There are some things that we can draft very quickly, the alignment to the statutory requirements and kind of just have them ready to go so this board can look at them, discuss them, and then when the moratorium is over and we can start publishing, we just go. We can get it done and we can get it over to the State Board of Education. So I'm happy in January to bring you the language for the statutory alignment and the disciplinary action if that suits the board.
The chair sees no problem with that. Board members, does that sound like a good starting place for us for January, as things kind of roll out and fizzle out? And so in terms of our items for next meeting, I do want to make note, because we are in the winter months. I thought I saw a flurry today. I get excited about snow. So speaking of which, Kelly, are we going to be able to come back in person for January, or will we be virtual?
Now, it is my understanding that this was the only month that was an issue as far as scheduling that conference room in the building. Now, with that being said, Chair Kitchen, you can decide at any point in time that you want to make that transition for whatever reason, and we will follow your lead.
Okay, so just so as a reminder that this board follows the school closing schedule for Baltimore County. So in the event that Baltimore County is closed, that means MSDE is closed, which means that we could not have our meeting. We are not able to switch gears, like if school is closed, to just switch over to a virtual session. We would have to make that. So Kelly, even if we said we were having a virtual meeting and school was closed, or Baltimore County schools were closed, our meeting still would be canceled, correct?
Yeah, I can double check the handbook, but I'm 99.9% sure the answer is yes.
Okay. I would like to kind of come back in person because this is our second meeting that we've been virtual, correct? Yeah, this is our second meeting. So I would like to come back in person. I think there's a lot to be said, and just understanding and the camaraderie and just having those conversations and collaboration that is felt when we're all together in a room. So I would like to come back together for our January meeting. Our January meeting is scheduled for, just to be sure, it's the 4th, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's the 4th. And then our items for the next meeting, we would have our usual items: the call to order, public comment, state board update, announcements, communication update, the approval of the December meeting minutes, and then we would just start. Kelly, would we just kind of, the disciplinary action, is that how we would label it on our agenda in terms of what
Yeah,
we're
I think what we'll put is regulatory items.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll list exactly the COMAR that you're going to see, because it will be several pieces based on the alignment to the statutory changes.
Okay.
And it will be for discussion.
Okay. And then anything else we need to discuss for the next meeting? Discussion. So
I'm sorry, Melita. Are we going to discuss the meeting with the people in Annapolis? Would we discuss that then or prior to that?
I would probably include it in my communication update in terms of where we are with that, Sandy. I don't know if we need it to be a separate item because it looks like we're going to need to got to kind of figure out some things like logistics, how we move forward. But I was planning to put it in my communication update. Would you like to see it as a separate item?
No, it's fine in the communications update.
Okay. So without objection, our January agenda would be call to order, public comment, state board update, our announcements, communication update, the approval of the December meeting minutes, and then we would label the regulatory items to kind of start our new work. Without objection, motion to approve our January agenda. So approved. So our January, can't talk now. January agenda is set. Dr. McGee, did I see your hand?
So it went up and it went back down, just to say that we do have a snow date for January on the following Thursday, the 11th. I don't know if you want to note that, just to
Thank you for that reminder. Thank you for that reminder. In the event that for the January and February months, like in the event that Thursday is a snow day, then our meeting will automatically move to the next Thursday. So in terms of planning your calendar and kind of looking ahead, you may want to pencil in both those dates as a just in case, as you're working on your January planning and meetings and things like that. Thank you for that reminder, Dr. McGay. Any other items for discussion?
Hi, Melita, it's Jake. I just wanted to let you know you did see a flurry here in Elkton, right on the Delaware-Maryland line. We do have a dusting of snow, and it's been snowing all morning. It's quite beautiful.
That is amazing. No, it just looks cold and dreary here in central Maryland. It's cold outside and it's dreary, but thank you for that update. Without any further ado, the chair is going to, without objection, I should say, the chair is going to adjourn our meeting at 11:06 a.m.
And everyone who is staying on for our orientation for new members, please don't leave. As much as I know, you might want to go enjoy the snow if you're with Dr. Bowers-Ebley.
So
I'll do
Sean, is it fair? Could they just take a quick break because we have been a little bit of discussion?
Absolutely. Please, why don't we reconvene for those members, and we can stop the live stream since this will be just a few members staying off the orientation. So if MSDE staff can stop the live stream afterward, after we kind of all disperse. But why don't we go ahead and say we'll come back around 11:15 or so. And when I see everyone's kind of made it back, we'll go ahead and get started. And I'll do my best to get us out of here as soon as possible so you can enjoy the rest of your day.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Cheers. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Bye.
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 January.
Were we supposed to meet again in reference to the letter, or are we okay?
Nope, we're good to go.
Okay. All
Yep.
right. Well,
Thank you
see
for
you
asking.
all. No problem. See you guys.
Yeah.
Have a great day, guys. And for those staying on, go ahead and feel free to take a break, and I'll see you guys at 11. We'll get started a little after 11:15.
Your chair,
can I-
go do chair things. I'm actually going to start making phone calls.
Sounds good.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
Joy, before you do, Dylan, are you still with us? We're still live streaming.
Oh, good catch, Kelly.
Let me chat him. Let's pause.
Kelly, do you
Sure.
meet me?
No, ma'am.
Bye, Melita.
Bye. Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
I suggest we take a few minutes break while I try to get a hold of Dylan.
Absolutely.
And then once the live streaming has been cut off, we can get started.
Sounds good.